A rock star by the name of Ted Nugent, he is famous for his outlandish guitar riffs, thrilling live performances, and seemingly gigantic personality. However, there is a hidden aspect to his story that is known only to his long-lost buddies. From his days as a member of the Amboy Dukes to his solo career, Nugent's musical accomplices have much to say regarding the Motor City Madman and his tenure with the band. When no one was looking, what really took place? How would you describe Nugent as a person? Did his intense presence unite them or drive a wedge between them? The bandmates who were once his collaborators reveal in this film experiences and surprising facts that they have never shared with anybody else. Hearing what they have to say can make you reevaluate everything. You were familiar with Ted Nugent. Stay tuned to enjoy this wild ride. Throughout his legendary career, Ted Nugent had a groundbreaking impact that continues to this day half a century after his death. He is truly deserving of the title of rock's greatest of all time. As a wildly skilled rock guitarist, Ted Nugent was famous all over the globe. He initially gained widespread attention in the 1960s when he was a member of the psychedelic rock band the Amboy Dukes. The band's smash single Journey to the Center of the Mind featured stunning guitar work by Nugent. Despite Nugent's distaste for psychedelic drugs, he was delighted to contribute to their creation because they were penned by the band's keyboardist, Steve Farmer. This type of music performed by the group. Although that did lead to some tension within the band, Nugent's guitar work was the driving force behind all of their accomplishments, whether it was professionally or in his solo projects. His signature blend of musical prowess and defiant spirit began to take form during this time. The 1970s were a watershed decade for rock musician Ted Nugent. His rise to fame was aided by his solo works. Hits like Stranglehold and Cat Scratch Fever from his debut album, Steven established him as a guitar hero. It didn't take long for Nugent to gain fame for his energetic live performances, where he performed quick, loud music. After a while, everyone would start to expect his guitar solos. What this? He stood out from his contemporaries and won over a large fan base thanks to his distinctive sound, which fused hard rock and blues. His unconventional lifestyle in particular contributed to his success. In addition to retaining his signature sound, Nugent has successfully reinvented himself throughout the years. He joined the ensemble in the late 80s and stayed till the early 90s. Along with Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades, they formed the rock band Damn Yankees. Their smash hit, High Enough, demonstrates that Nugent could maintain their dominance in the rock music industry despite the rise of alternative music. There was only one way for him to climb the music industry ladder, and that was this: he had to focus on his creativity without opting to alter his music's fundamental elements. In this instance, they are guitar shredders for heavy metal. In addition to his music, the country musician Nugent is notorious for his outspoken political views and even more controversial actions. Even after pleading with his followers to support him, he remained at odds with a few of them. Weapons and hunting are within your capabilities, but his honesty ensured that his admirers would always have his back. Despite the controversies, Ted Nugent remained and is a major figure in rock music. A lot of today's emerging rock musicians get inspiration from his hard rock heritage. Not everyone was pleased with Ted's meteoric climb to stardom, and the band started to disband as his fame did. What a result. The Amboy Dukes, Ted Nugent's first foray into rock multidimensional art, were a significant component of his formative years and the band that brought him fame. The Amboy Dukes were a band that emerged in 1964 from the burgeoning rock scene in Detroit. Nugent was the band's guitarist, the lead vocalist, with the other members of the band taking turns. With the addition of harsh guitar riffs, the Amboy Dukes were able to swiftly move from classic rock to hard rock. The band's innovative approach was unprecedented for the day, and Nugent's guitar work was superb. They were distinct from other rock bands because of this. Is capable of. When Journey to the Center of the Mind came out in 1968, they shot to national fame. They rose to prominence in the American rock music industry as a result of the song's immense popularity. The band's music was heavily influenced by Nugent's wild guitar playing. Although Ted Nugent's lyrics were rife with hallucinogenic imagery and discussed self-discovery, his music has always defied genre conventions with its pinpoint accuracy and intense, explosive intensity. Hit after hit, the band's star continued to rise, and word got out that Nugent was a guitar prodigy. The Amboy was there when things started looking up. While Nugent and the rest of the band were experiencing creative issues, Dukes began to struggle with his own identity. Despite the disapproval of his peers, Ted frequently took the lead in determining the course of the band's performances and other endeavors. He felt it would be more engaging to emphasize the tension in the guitar sound, but his bandmates insisted on incorporating more psychedelic elements into their songs. This set the stage for the circumstances that ultimately led to Nugent embarking on a major solo project, since it agitated the entire band and created divisions that didn't appear to be going away. In the early 1970s, while the Amboy Dukes were already disbanding, Nugent was prepared to step up and create music independently. A new chapter in Nugent's life began with the dissolution of the band. He was prepared to prove that he is the best solo rock guitarist, if not the best overall, once he was no longer constrained by a band. Despite their brief tenure, the Amboy Dukes made an indelible impression on rock history. Ted Nugent's flamboyant career also began with them. A solo performance on the importance of creativity. With each new hit, Ted Nugent's band membership grew more apparent. He oversaw the band as well. He played in the band the Amboy Dukes when he was a teenager. He eventually became a solo artist. Whether on or offstage, Nugent was the showstopper. There was less compromise and more disagreement in his band since he had to constantly be in charge of the creative side of the goal. He, along with several of his former bandmates, had harsh things to say about him. Everything from writing to vision is under the man's control. While it was successful, many of the stubborn people felt left out because of this kind of stubbornness, which led to the constant pursuit of. Not only did the legendary Ted Nugent sing lead, but he also oversaw all of the band's rehearsals. It was said that he oversaw tour, record, and event planning in addition to the sound. He was able to better appreciate his music after gaining this holistic perspective. Just as he had intended, but it infuriated his bandmates who felt undervalued. Collaborating with Nugent was described by many as an enjoyable yet exhausting experience. While Nugent's intelligence made it entertaining, his need to be in command made it exhausting. The topic of creative strength arose not only during performances, but also during the songwriting process. On occasion, members of the band Nugent would argue over the use of the loudspeakers. Despite the fact that he penned some of rock music's most terrible guitar riffs, the other Rasul members who had put so much effort into making the band what it was occasionally felt resentful against him. Some of them eventually became furious because they couldn't write songs together and claimed that this was preventing the band from progressing. As part of Nugent's scheme, however, Nugent felt no remorse for his actions. He claimed his beliefs were necessary to preserve the hard rock style of the 1980s, the decade that brought him fame. Ultimately, Ted Nugent's unwavering commitment to doing something different yielded double the reward. Despite the controversy, Nugent's band's distinctive musical vision persisted, and it was beneficial for business yet effective management to have the press cover him and portray him as a hard-rocking, free-spirited, no-nonsense personality without any egos. On the flip side, it had some negative consequences, such as alienating helpful people and leading to the dissolution of some of his bands. The band's reputation came at a cost, and they interviewed several former members to get their take on what it was like to work under such tight guidelines. Persona on stage, the Wildman vs. The band for decades, Ted Nugent's outrageous stage persona has been a major component of his work. The singer is dubbed the Motor City Madman due to the untamed nature of his music and the intensity of his voice. Nugent was a man offstage, but in that role, he seemed like a wild rock and roll animal playing the guitar at a dizzying rate that was difficult to describe. Clad in furs and wielding a Gibson Bertolin guitar, he was perpetually in a rush. On stage and in the crowd, Nugent embodied rock and roll excess. However, his high-pattern stagecraft frequently clashed with, and at times even overshadowed, the other members of the band who struggled to match or even be in the same frame as him. Being the center of attention didn't bother Nugent because he drew all eyes to himself when acting. What had bothered them was that his command of the stage made it hard for the rest of the band to be heard. As a result, Ted's high energy would lead him to do things like throw himself into the crowd and other potentially dangerous things. The crowd loved it, but his bandmate found it annoying. During the performance, everyone seemed to be staring at Nugent, which was unfair to the other performers and made tensions rise among some of them. Nugent's stage behavior blurred the line between music and performance art. His fans came to hear his thrilling guitar strokes, but many others were more interested in the mayhem and showmanship. This could hinder the group's ability to play in unison, and Nugent could try to play up the tension in the audience in a more dramatic way. Despite his struggles, Nugent's charisma as a singer contributed significantly to his success in the music industry. His image as a wildman attracted many fans who left wanting more and swearing he couldn't live up to it. The other musicians often had to deal with Nugent's unpredictable style and behavior while playing, which made it harder for them to create a cohesive act. Strategies used to support Nugent's solo work often contradicted what the band was doing jointly. She wouldn't remain a rock star. His bandmates, however, struggled to cope with his incessant need for personal attention. His extravagant performances garnered a lot of media attention, but they also revealed that the band was breaking up due to the other artists' fixation on the group's most eccentric member. Touring with Ted the Good, the Bad, and the Crazy, I'll never forget traveling with Ted Nugent, and I have many memories of both the good and the bad. For the majority of Nugent's bandmates, being on the road with him meant performing in thrilling, nerve-wracking, and high-energy shows nearly every day. There was never a dull moment because Nugent insisted on, "I want to put on the best live shows ever," and the best part was performing in front of a packed house. Off stage, his crazy attitude showed. Most of the time, it was just as crazy. For those who could handle it, the tours were filled with rock and roll, great music, and the joy of playing with one of the most entertaining acts in the world. But it wasn't all roses, there were dark points. Nugent was one of those people who kept going even when the lights went out on stage. When the band wasn't performing, he demanded the same level of dedication from them. Touring with Ted was mentally and emotionally taxing. He appeared to have boundless energy, which was physically exhausting in many ways. Members of the band would often remark about how life on tour was like a never-ending cycle, where sleep was a myth and something unexpected happened every other day. However, satire could be used as a weapon when boredom and stress built up on its own, such as when someone else's show ideas didn't mesh with their own or when touring became too much. Aside from exhaustion, there were actual instances when things went crazy. Especially if you believe that Nugent's performances or TV appearances were meant to conceal his insane behavior, you would be mistaken. There are numerous unbelievable stories about life on the road, dangerous trips where you could meet people, party hard, and in his pursuit of thrills, he placed himself and his crew in perilous situations where the delicate balance between fun, excitement, and risk became a part of the band's rock and roll history. Nevertheless, he left most of his coworkers to clean up after him. Despite the chaos, going on a tour with Ted Nugent was an opportunity to learn about rock history. Sharing the stage with a famous rock star at the peak of his game is an incredible experience, no matter how taxing it is on the mind and body. It is something that most artists would never trade for anything else. The band members stuck together through the good and bad times of the tours, which tested their endurance. These are, as a wildman, but also the extreme highs and lows of being one of the meanest rock stars on tour. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Nugent's tendency to speak his mind caused even more trouble off the stage. Nugent's controversial political views. Ted Nugent has been in the music business for a long time, and his music has been in the news, and has been involved in politics a lot, but his fans aren't like those of other artists. That's because of his political views, which have often been contentious both in the music industry and beyond. As an avid shooter and supporter of traditional social norms, people have always known what Nugent thinks, and he has always played his guitar with the same passion. His strong opinions about the Second Amendment are understood by those who like him, as is his fondness for guns and shooting in general, which many people find repulsive. As with most of Nugent's former bandmates, Ted's intense political involvement occasionally strained his relationships with them, particularly when their opinions differed. Some of his supporters may argue that he is entitled to the freedom of speech that allows him to express his true feelings, but it's interesting to note that Ted was frequently very angry about politics. People who had worked with Nugent in the past have told the press that there was tension in the camp, when action became the focal point of discussion about him both inside and outside the camp. As time went on, however, some band members became increasingly agitated that his political beliefs appeared to be interfering with their artistic work. Some band members felt that they were being held captive by politics, and Nugent's determination to always stand up for what he believed in caused some group members to dislike him. Not only did Nugent's involvement alter his relationships with other musicians, but it also altered public perception of him. The particulars of his controversial remarks, along with his steadfast advocacy for several causes like hunting and gun rights, have alienated some of his fans. Nugent has been famous for his outrageous comments about political figures and social problems, which have been perceived as pushing the envelope. You can't separate Ted Nugent's political views from his work as a rock artist. Despite this, Nugent will always be remembered for his music in the history of rock and roll. However, his political views have made him a very controversial figure. Just like all cultural heroes, Ted Nugent is deeply loved and hated. His stances on issues like immigration, gun control, and environmental control led to protests and boycotts. Despite the bad weather, Nugent remains unapologetic and doesn't appear to be changing his mind. Instead, he publicly promotes his beliefs. Financial disputes and power struggles in the business of rock throughout rock and roll's history, even disagreements over money and power, have been seen as part of the music. Ted Nugent's life as a rock musician is no different. Running a rock band became harder as it became more famous and wealthy. He has huge business empire, shares clear views without worrying about what might happen. His political views are strong, making him easy to like or dislike. As the years have passed, writers and music historians who were close to Ted have recounted their experiences working for him. A common thread among these accounts is the fact that due to his reputation as a loud and bossy boss, he became more involved in the business, which in turn led to disputes over payment, fees, and contracts. Frequently, these disputes revolved around who should be credited as the songwriter and who should receive royalties from the songs. This action was taken by Ted Nugent, who was often seen as the solely responsible party because he was the driving force behind the band's music. However, friends who contributed to the sound quality of his songs occasionally felt let down. The distribution of profits from records, tours, and merchandise became a contentious issue, particularly among former members who felt they should receive a larger share, arguing that they were underpaid. Some members also claimed that the murkiness surrounding the band's finances caused power struggles, making it impossible for them to live and perhaps even collaborate. Ted Nugent's strong-willed personality was evident in all aspects of his life, including his business dealings. As he took control, band members and friends frequently got into arguments with Nugent. While this approach kept the brand's image consistent and information from leaking out, it also turned people off because they felt unrecognized for their hard work, and the toxic work environment that resulted from Ted's control issues and his co-workers' incessant demands for fairness led many to leave the deal. Nugent's business sense played a significant role in his successful work life, which was otherwise plagued by money problems and internal strife. While his personal life with his bandmates was less than ideal, Nugent's methods of promoting himself and his tour were highly effective. As Ted Nugent's success grew, some band members left, only to return later, leaving other band members with different emotions. Many of Nugent's project partners felt the strain. His business sense, which helped his career, also caused many of his relationships to fail. Nevertheless, his ability to manage people and own a profitable brand kept him in business in the field. Those around him usually had to deal with the fallout of his success, as arguments over power and money led to many splits over the years. Connected to Nugent's imposing demeanor both on and off stage. At times, other band members found it difficult to get along with Nugent due to his aggressive behavior and need to be in control. They felt unimportant and disrespected. Eventually, this created unrest in the band, as some members left due to personal or financial issues, or simply the difficulty of dealing with someone so tough. A major factor contributing to these breakups was a lack of creative power. Despite Nugent's reputation for having a rich mind and heavy guitar use in his music, he frequently allowed himself some creative freedom in the way his music is played. While his intransigence contributed to his distinctive sound, it made it difficult for his bandmates to collaborate professionally, particularly if they wanted to or felt unrecognized. Many, however, saw this as pointless, and eventually many chose to depart from Nugent's circle rather than remain. Ultimately, most band members departed for extended periods due to disagreements with Nugent's style of music, financial difficulties, or an overwhelming preference for being in his company. Simultaneously, Ted Nugent achieved great success as a solo artist, while those who collaborated with him for a short period achieved great success. Working with Ted Nugent was often difficult and contentious, but many of his former bandmates have said nice things about how hard he worked, how talented he was, and how much he loved music. One of the most admired aspects of Nugent's job was how dedicated he was to his craft. Bandmates would often talk about how determined he was to get better, which was a source of frustration for those who had worked so hard to be on stage with him. Ultimately, most of the splits were caused by Ted Nugent's stubbornness, which made him famous as a rock star but also hard to deal with. What they admire are the positive reflections of their bandmates. Their guitar playing is absolutely stunning, and they never fail to deliver a jaw-dropping performance. Nugent was relentless in his pursuit of excellence for his collaborators, whether it meant putting in countless hours of practice or stepping onto the stage. His skill as a guitarist is something that his former bandmates often gush over. He left an indelible mark on the rock genre with his infectious riffs and technical prowess. However, this is not to be taken as an endorsement by Nugent, who acknowledged that working with such a mind was enjoyable and beneficial. The rest of the band was able to join forces on a grander scale than Revolutionary because he was fearless. Beyond his singing abilities, Nugent was widely admired for his strong desire to lead and drive, as well as his strict teacher. His willingness to take charge and decide how things should be done, especially with the music and the shows, made sure his message was always clear. His dedication to the craft was strong. Vision, she worked hard and was admired by her coworkers, even those who didn't share her work ethic. Finally, some of Ted Nugent's bandmates say that he helped them professionally in some way. That is, the addition of fame wasn't for nothing, because some people got the chance to be well known. Many of his fellow artists were able to break through because of Ted Nugent. It wasn't easy, but it's hard to tee. They were compelled to be a part of her singing story because it would impact their own music careers in some way. Despite the arguments and problems, the last part brings it all together and shows how close the relationships with Nugent really are. Where are they now, looking back? The Ted Nugents over the years, ex-bandmates, have gone their separate ways, making it in the music business and other fields as well. Some have continued playing either solo or in new bands. Others sought out other artistic or professional opportunities. The time they spent working with Nugent, despite its occasional roughness, helped their jobs. Despite the difficulties, most of them remember their time with the Motor City Madman as something special. It was an exclusive that helped me grow and learn. Many of Nugent's former bandmates, particularly from the early days of the Amboy Dukes, have been seen around the music scene recently. Back then, the guitarists, drummers, and bass players left Nugent to play in other rock bands or go solo, where they could freely express their artistic ideas without being controlled by him. Some of them have faded from public view entirely. Instead, Nugent was busy producing music, writing songs, or mentoring young performers who he had helped. Some of Nugent's former bandmates, particularly from his Damn Yankees quintet, have become famous in the rock world. People like Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades have also. They had great runs with their bands and other projects, which entertained fans all over the world. Since these artists were already famous before they joined forces, they were able to use their time in Damn Yankees to keep their gourd that of being rock stars. What made them even stronger was the friendship and respect they had for Nugent, another exciting part of their long and successful lives. So that's it. If you liked learning about these rock stars, please click the like button and tell us what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth looks into the music world. Hey, stay tuned, click on this next movie to see more untold stories and rock and roll history. Thanks for seeing.